and the latest information on spending patterns and consumer behavior in the country. And here's my pick of 5 new titles in the bookshops this week. From the government's chief economics advisor, a critique of mainstream economics. A new biography of the legendary playback singer and actor. From the noted documentary filmmaker and historian, Guru Dutt's classic comes alive in English and Urdu. Profiles of women gangsters who ran Mumbai's biggest underworld rackets. And the historical writer unearths a 19th century archaeological scandal in Uttar Pradesh of the relics of the Buddha. Columnist and former editor Gautam Adhikari, who's now based in Washington, D.C., is just out with a new book. It's called The Intolerant Indian, How India Must Rediscover a Lost Liberal Space. Up ahead, Gautam Adhikari on The Intolerant Indian. Welcome back to Just Books. Well-known editor, columnist, and fellow at the East-West Center in Washington, D.C., Gautam Adhikari is out with a new book. It's called The Intolerant Indian, Why We Must Rediscover a Liberal Space. Gautam, it's a provocative title, The Intolerant Indian. In fact, many people would argue the exact opposite and say that in 21st century India is a more tolerant place because of a youthful, very dynamic population, which is more secular than, say, pre-reforms India.
That's true. In fact, I make it very clear right in the beginning of the book to say that I am not talking about intolerant India. I'm talking about the intolerant Indian, the guy and the woman, usually the guy, who does not understand what the idea of India was and what the idea of India should be, in my view, for it to survive as one of the world's most remarkable experiments in secular, democratic republic.
And how do you believe, since the founding fathers set about creating a secular republic, and the members of the Constituent Assembly wrote one of the great constitutions, We the People, that everyone is equal, how do you believe that this secular, democratic space has shrunk?
Because I actually think that the liberal space has shrunk. Democracy, on the other hand, has spread very widely, and as it spreads, it seems to be losing a little bit of depth. In fact, quite a bit of depth.
The key issue, of course, has been religious conflagration and intolerance against minorities. India, with its very large Muslim population, has advanced at some levels as a secular nation, but also been repeatedly beaten back. The destruction of the Babri Masjid, the 2002 riots in Bombay were really turning points, weren't they?
I actually take the destruction of the Babri Masjid as a major turning point in our history of secular democracy. It's true that India is seen widely by Indians in particular as a very tolerant nation, but if you really look at the last 60 years, I can't name any other serious functioning democracy where so many people have been killed because of religious, ethnic, or parochial reasons. I mean, the numbers are astounding, actually. It's true that from time to time it sort of lies low and then it comes back again. But at the same time, the structure of secularism itself underwent a change. And it became, on the one hand, from the government point of view, it was a very loosey-goosey kind of accommodate everything and give in to every demand kind of secularism. On the other hand, it was countered by a strident nationalism of both the Hindu variety as well as a strident Islamism by certain, but not, of course, when you compare it with, say, Pakistan. And there's a huge...
Indeed, all our neighbors.
Yeah, I would say most of our neighbors, yes.
Right, who really seem to have greater indices of intolerance than India does. You make other points which are even more interesting to prove your argument that Indians are increasingly intolerant. One is, of course, based on gender.
Right.
crimes against women.
Yes.
And these show no let-up.
In fact, when I say the intolerant Indian, I'm not talking only about the religiously intolerant. I'm talking about those who demand, on flimsy grounds, the ban on books, for instance. There's a demand going on for banning a book by Joseph Lalibelt on Gandhi for completely, one small passage in the book.
Right, and we've had a long history of this kind of censure.
Absolutely. We banned 9 Days to Rama way back in the 50s.
The satanic verses.
Satanic verses, in fact, the whole, what should I say, the conflict over the book started in India, in the sense that it was a review published in one of the Indian papers that led to Indian Muslims demonstrating and asking for a ban, which was seen in Bradford and Birmingham, and they demonstrated, Muslims in Britain demonstrated, and which was again seen by the Ayatollah Khomeini and his associates, and they decided this was a good opportunity to come in as leader of the Islamic Ummah and ask for Rushdie's head.
Right, and more recently, of course, Rohinton Mysteries, such
Indeed.
a long journey, which was dropped from the syllabus of really one of India's most liberal universities, Bombay University.
Which is astounding, and in fact, the changing character of Bombay, Mumbai as it's called now, is in microcosm the kind of tale that I'm afraid that India might be going through, where there is not just religious intolerance, but regional intolerance. I mean, the Shiv Sena, for instance, started out by demonstrating against South Indians, trying to keep them out. Then they went against Muslims for a long time.
Now against North Indians.
Now against North Indians. The Shiv Sena and its offshoot, the MNS, the Maharashtra Navnirman Samiti. I think that is a dangerous trend, and that's going on and on. And I think the caving in of an institution like Bombay University to the demand to ban Rohinton Mysteries' book is a clear result of this, is that the character of Bombay itself has changed.
Do you think growing prosperity and freedoms driven by market reforms really has this effect of making mindsets more narrow and illiberal?
No, on the contrary, I think it can work the other way, but to sustain both market reforms as well as India's growth story, you need not just a liberal economy and a liberal polity, you need a liberal mindset. And I'm afraid that is what is narrowing, that has narrowed in the past, and that is not totally suitable for sustaining the kind of new society that Indians
What
are
are the
hoping to bring.
panaceas that you suggest?
Well, first of all, I think that one grave drawback of the Indian development story has been education, primary education in particular. I mean, it's in a pathetic state. We keep boasting about the IIMs and the IITs and show a handful of people to the world that we are doing fine. But the fact is that the Indian primary education is in a mess. Indian primary health is in a mess, which affects the status of women in a very big way. And so I think one of the major steps that have to be taken is, of course, through an educational war, a war on not just illiteracy, but
Right.
war on the lack of
Mind you,
education.
there is a war. The new census is just out and shows improved figures for literacy and so on. But the fact of the matter is that what is the quality of education?
That's why I said education and not literacy. And literacy alone is not going to work. I mean, mind you, every society, when you look at, say, London or New York in the 19th century, when you read about it, when you read even
the industrializing, urbanizing process.
I mean, all these societies went through a phase. But is it necessary for us to reinvent the wheel? We have got the experience of other countries, and we could be like, say, South Korea or Japan, where they actually copied whatever is required in that urbanization, the march towards urbanization and modernization that has taken place already in several parts of the world, and implement it here. That requires the second part, which is strong political leadership. And that is where I have a problem.
You also argue, when you talk about a strong, more dynamic, forward-looking political leadership, you look at the idea of nationhood. And do you believe India has a stronger sense of nationhood today, or is that too under threat from narrow-minded, intolerant, illiberal groups of people around the country?
At first glance, it would look like we have got a very strong sense of nationhood, especially when you watch cricket. So we do unite as a nation when we root for our national team. But that's like rooting for a club team. You know, it happens with British supporters of football in the World Cup, for instance. They can be pretty rough. And what I'm saying is that just being nationalistic doesn't make you tolerant. You have the experience of Germany, not in the not too distant past, where people were extremely nationalistic and they were fiercely German, angrily German, but they were not at all tolerant. And I'm afraid that we might head that way if we don't temper our nationalism with liberalism. Unfortunately, the liberal space in the Indian political system has shrunk. You see, there's a very, what should I say, intense Hindu or let's say religious nationalistic right wing.
Whether Hindu or Muslim.
Yeah, it's a religious nationalistic identity seeking, which doesn't recognize the plurality of Indian identities. And on the other hand, there is a very dogmatic and outdated system of communist parties, which are called the left in this country, whereas actually I personally think that the communists are amongst the most reactionary because they resist change, they really resist progress. And they, on the other hand, dominate all kinds of, but they are secular, of course, but they are not liberal. And between that, there is a muddle in the middle, which might be called the Congress Party, which might be called the various regional parties, where there is a lack, there is a paucity of clear thinking. Liberalism is not occupying the middle ground and a little bit of that, a little bit of that. You know, that was the old Hindu economic policies that we followed. What I mean by liberalism is a very clear recognition of what it means to be tolerant.
Really a new age of enlightenment, as it were.
Absolutely, and we have to go through that. We have to learn how to live and let live.
Gautam Adhikari, it's an excellent polemic, The Intolerant Indian, Why We Must Rediscover a Liberal Space. Thank you very much. I urge everyone to read this book as an argument and essay. It's very well presented and reasoned. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
That's all for now, but I'll be back next weekend with another edition of Just Books. Until then, from all of us here at NDTV, goodbye.